Yeah, thank you so much. Our chief guest, Madam CS, my good friend, Justice Laibuta, Irene and the Enable team, visitors from across the continent, also from Tanzania, from Uganda, from South Africa, all the way from Nigeria, my brother from Somalia here, my colleagues in the sector, Commissioner Sati, the Vice Chair of CAJ in the House, and other stakeholders. Karibuni sana and good morning. I heard Irene saying Enable is 15 years old. So Irene, I'm also 16 years old as someone with disability, so I'm 1 year older than Enable. So somehow we are tracking the journey, or we are age mate, let me put it. And thank you so much for also inviting us to this very important occasion. I know this is not the first time we are attending this important meeting. Last year, we were at the trademark Gigiri, where Enable, I think, launched Kenya's standard on product and accessibility on product and services. And it is the first kind of a launch in Africa at that time. And from there, we have learned quite many, many things. I think technology and disability is something we need to focus on. And gladly and very importantly, it is rhyming with the strategy of the government of the day, our government, that is digitization, technology and digitization, more or less, of the services. And for people with disability, technology is the best ally. All forms of disability interact with the barriers differently. For people who are blind, for people who are deaf, communication is a major barrier, extremely a major barrier. And the only way to address that barrier is through technology. For the deaf community, we have seen many apps coming up, even when you don't have a SLI being present. For blind people, they can even see the image much more better than wewe ambayo uko na macho ya kuona, all because of technology. You know, you've heard Justice Laibuta saying he's lecturing, you know, from the comfort of his home during COVID, all because of technology, you know, doing amazing things. And many other blind people are also enjoying, you know. I think as a country, well, as a developing country, we have a long way to go, but we have made a great stride when it comes to disability inclusion and barrier-free society. And we must appreciate that. And I think maybe I will take you back a little bit in history. From Jomo Kenyatta 1, you know, when, you know, focus and conversation around education for children and learners with disabilities started. And many commissions, like, you know, came up with Minde Commission, a number of commissions, put a lot of emphasis on the best way for children or for persons with disabilities to address education, barrier-free education. And then President Moi came with the famous Harambee. Those of you who are old enough to know, 10 years or a decade of disability inclusion, something that led to the birth of NFDK, National Fund for Disabled of Kenya, to address issues around education, assistive devices, and other economic supports. And then came the Lincoln of our time, Mzee Kibaki. Mzee Kibaki signed barely a few months out of a wheelchair Disability Act. And it created a National Council for Persons with Disability. And the agenda of disability became more of moving away from the charity, from the medical, from all those kind of model describing disability in this country to now a human right, a kind of a perspective. And the National Council was born to spearhead, to mandate matters disability in this country. And then implementation of that constitution brought a lot of good things. Issues of AGBO, and more importantly, performance contracting also came when the issue of disability became very important. Even though, Madam CS, in the next financial year, it was said it will be expunged. And we had a meeting with the CS, Prime Cabinet Secretary Honorable Mudavadi, that this is a human rights agenda that should not be expunged. And I think the government is also coming up with a bill on performance contracting that it should not be at the whim of the executive now, it should be anchored in a law. And it will going to address even how county government, commissions, and other independent offices that are not part of the contracting on disability agenda can be, you know, made to implement issue of disability. Public Service Commission reports of 2021-2022 put 3.6% of public institutions to have their website accessible. You can imagine, 3.6%. So you can imagine what it means to persons with disabilities, especially those who are blind. In the report that as a council we launched March this year, the first report actually, on the status of disability mainstreaming in this country, only 8 institutions have reported on the indicator on the ICT or in technology on this particular, for this particular important conversation, let me say. So we have a long way to go, but we want to really make it much more stronger that all MDAs we're going to comply with the inclusion strategy. I want to say, as I have said earlier, you know, we always remind each other that disability is not about people's impairment. It's about barriers across people with different impairments. And our focus then is to address how to not, if not to remove, to greatly minimize those barriers that makes persons with disability not to freely, productively, meaningfully participate in their societies. And technology is one of the way. And Enable is leading the way, always every year, challenging us that we need to rethink on how we do our business and of how we can make disability a reality. I mean inclusion a reality. And we're going to walk the walk with you, Madam Irene and the team, and we'll see to it that Kenya, you know, I was telling my brother here that in sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya is a giant. Many countries look up to us for direction, especially even for matters disability, even though we have a way to. There is no single country in the world uses AGBO, access to government procurement opportunities, you know, for women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Performance contracting is only in Kenya. Some countries come and have a benchmarking with us, but they have turned it into a law. A good example is Rwanda. So we have a long way to go, but we have set some standard on making inclusion a reality. The current government, in its manifesto, they put the issue of universal coverage for health. You see, disability and health, you know, in one way or another. And disability lifestyle is the most expensive lifestyle. Things that maybe ordinarily you don't have to incur expense. Communities with disabilities incur expenses. I use a wheelchair, minus this wheelchair, I don't have legs. You know, if someone is deaf, for example, and there's no SLI, you know, if someone is blind, white cane and technology, it's a very expensive lifestyle. Paradoxically, the persons with disabilities are again the poorest. And unfortunately, what we are not also told, the economic sense of the lifestyles of people with disability in itself. These apps, the technology, all of them is an economy in itself, generated more or less by the lifestyles of persons with disability. We might not empirically speak about it, and there's no maybe research or data to it. The economy that the lifestyle of people with disability generate to the bigger economy is way bigger than what affirmatively is allocated to persons with disability to be included in the society. So CCPI, we are economy, we are coffee, we are tea, we are gold, we are everything. So as a country, what we are trying to look at, how we can integrate a conversation into the business, or rather business sense, or economic sense into the matters disability in this country, so that we can export even assistive technology, you know, wheelchairs, you know, services on disability, so that Kenya is not only known by inclusion, but even by churning product and making tilting, you know, because if we continue like that, we will be still stuck on the charity model of persons with disability, yet their economy. For example, I just want to give a little example. You see, a simple wheelchair in Kenya costs about 20,000 to 30,000. And roughly 1 million Kenyans are sitting on a wheelchair. It can be more. And every day the number is increasing. That translates to 20 billion. Not million, 20 billion. And there are factories there that are manufacturing those wheelchairs. You know, there are people who are working there. Taxes, I mean, other fringe benefit or multiply effect, you know, warehouse, you know, transportation, and, you know, and such kind of thing. You can imagine. If someone is blind, you know, this technology, you know, whether it is JAWS, whether it is these new apps, all of them are very expensive. If it is the deaf and there is an app that is translating, you know, behaving or mimicking SLI, it's expensive, you know. So all forms of disabilities are expensive, and it is time that we need to tap into that to make sure that not only inclusion is a right, but making business sense out of matters disability if we are to continue forward. I think this is a function that will be continuing. Irene will be part of this conversation going forward, and I came to represent our CS who sent an apology. Maybe she is stuck on something equally very urgent and pressing in a short notice, actually, let me put it, and we will walk the journey together. Otherwise, wageni yetu all the way from Africa and other parts of the world, karibuni sana, enjoy the hospitality of Kenya and Kenyan people. Thank you.